Pam Dunwell from Your Nurse Advocates Consulting, and this is going to be episode 4 of Bedside Stories. And we're talking about my journey through 40 years plus of nursing, and how I became an advocate and a patient advocate, and what shaped that, and why I work so hard for my patients and want to get all of them everything that they think, that I think, and they think, and that they want and deserve. So this is kind of what some of my experience that have shaped me. So for today, for episode number 4, is going to be a little bit more of a personal one. We've gone through pre-nursing school, we've gotten through nursing school, and now we are on my first job. This is, fortunately, I was hired on at the hospital where I went to nursing school, and that was Augustana Hospital in Lincoln Park in Chicago. That hospital is no longer there. But the nice thing about going to nursing school is 3 years of nursing school, doing a lot of my clinicals at the hospital. It was a really easy adjustment for me to go into practicing as a registered nurse, pass boards, all of that good stuff. And now I'm on my first job. And so it's funny, back then in the city of Chicago, my first nursing job, I was making $8.35 an hour. And that was much less than the Chicago garbage men were making at that time. So just kind of back in 1983 is when I started. July of 1983 is when I started my first RN job. And that's what my hiring wage was for mixed shifts. I mean, that was day shift, but it was $8.35 an hour. So I felt like I'd really made it. So my unit that I worked on was a very busy 40-bed med-surg unit. It was a surgical oncology unit. So a lot of the patients on our floor had some form of cancer, and they had to have some kind of surgery. We had a lot of ovarian cancer patients on our unit. That was really hard. And this episode, as a new RN, I was wanted to be the best RN that I could. And at that point in time, we practiced what they called team nursing. So it was a 40-bed unit, and a patient load for us was 6 to 8 patients each RN, but we had an LPN that worked with us. Same, we were a team, and we had a nursing assistant, a CNA, a certified nursing assistant, that was a part of that team. So there was 3 of us for 6 to 8 patients, and usually it was 8 patients. And so that really made it doable. I really liked that form of nursing, and I don't know why we went away from that, but I thought that was a very good way to nurse, because the LPN could do past medications, could do some IVs, and I could, do my assessments, do my teaching, and do all. So I really liked that model. And then the nice thing was, with our CNA, there was always me and the CNA, or the LPN and the CNA, to do, baths and things like that. So there was always 2 sets of hands to get all that stuff done. And I think it really worked very well. I wish they would go back to that. But anyway, I was a new RN. I wanted to be the best nurse that I could be. And I will never forget, I won't say her name, but this was over 40 years ago. I remember her name. I close my eyes, I can see her face. I see her husband, and I see her 2 kids. And she was in her 30s, and she had breast cancer that had metastasized into her brain. And I will never forget that this was my first lesson. And when I precepted new grads, if you're a new grad, or if you're a new nurse watching this, there's a big lesson here. And I learned it the hard way. And I shared with all the nursing students that I've precepted throughout the years about this story, and they've all heard it. But we did tape recorder report on that unit. So before the night shift, before they left, they recorded their report, and then they left. So it changed a shift. There wasn't a lot of overlap, and they thought that was more effective way to do it. There were some positive things about that, but the negative thing was is they weren't there to ask questions. If they were missing something in their report, or we had a question, we couldn't get it answered. So that was kind of hard. Well, anyway, we'd gotten a report, got our patient load. I met with my CNA, I met with my LPN, and we kind of planned out our day. And when you're a new grad, you are so task focused. You've got meds due, you've got your IVs to check. You want to make sure that nobody left you with a dry IV bag at the end of the shift, that you had to get that changed right away. And so kind of my modus operandi as a new nurse is we'd get report, I'd meet with my LPN and meet with my CNA, we'd figure out, okay, what's our game plan for our shift. And then I would eyeball all the patients. I would go see each one, just to make sure that everybody was good and no one was in any kind of trouble and all that. So I never forget, I went into this room and she said, and I introduced myself, and I'd had her before. I'd had her in the past. And I said, how are you doing? And she said, could you just stay with me? And I said, I promise I'll be right back. I need to just go check my IVs and check my other patients. And once, I find out everybody's okay, nobody needs anything, I'd be happy to come back and sit with you. Please don't go. Please don't go. And all I could think about was the wrong thing to think about was what was going on with my other 7 patients. And she didn't share why she wanted me to stay. She just kept asking me to stay with her, kept asking me to stay with her. And I didn't. I went and checked on the rest of my patients. I had one dry IV bag. I had to switch out. I came back to her room and she had passed away. She was gone. I've never lived that down. I think about that a lot. I think about that as, what kind of a nurse would leave a patient? Obviously, it was at a time of need, and I didn't know. I was so young and so new. I didn't know. I didn't have that experience. I didn't have that gut, to tell me, something's not right, or she's close to the end, or you need to stay with her. I didn't have that. And that's, when they say sometimes nurses eat their young, we can't, our new nurses, they don't have that skill. They don't have that um intuition, because they haven't had enough experiences to develop that. We're the young nurses, and as I was at that time, very, very task orientated. And I didn't have those skills, those soft skills, so to speak, to know when I needed to maybe not focus so much on the task and focus on being that nurse that patient needed. I'll never forget when her husband came in with her 2 kids. It was horrible. They were screaming and in disbelief, and it was a tough lesson for me. Really, really tough. Um, I didn't know if I wanted to stay in that unit anymore. I was looking at other units to see if there was openings. I was just trying to run away from the issue. I just wanted to run away from the fact that I screwed up. But I had other patients on that unit. 2 other women stand out very much. I remember their names as well. But they were both older women, and they both had ovarian cancer. They had abdominal surgery. Back then, they called it zipper surgery, but it was an incision that went from, like their belly button, up to the sternum of their chest, and it was just came across. And oftentimes with these ovarian cancer patients, they were, undernourished. They weren't real healthy because of the cancer. A lot of times those incisions would open up, and I'll never forget another lady, and the doctor stood in the door and listened to me talk. I don't know why he didn't interrupt or say anything, but she was some vomiting, and I don't want to gross anybody out, and I apologize, but she was coughing up some blood, and she had been eating some red jello, and she was just so scared, and she was scared. She didn't want to die. And she said, oh, this is just the jello, right? This is just the red jello. And nowadays, when we have issues like that, we don't give red jello. We give a different color so that we can always tell the difference. But then she had a red Jello, and the doctor stood in the door, and it was very hard, and she didn't want to die. She didn't want to give up, and she was dying. And so she says, "Can I go to the ICU? Can they fix me? Can I go to the ICU? I think I need to go to the intensive care unit." And again, the doctor was standing, the hospitalist, the on-call doc was standing in the doorway, and he's looking at me, and she couldn't see him. And he's like shaking his head, "No, that really isn't appropriate." And I just looked at him and I says, "Can we please just get her to ICU? Can we see if there's a bed open that would take her?" And just the peace of mind, just to see, that anguish kind of leave her face, knowing that she was going to the ICU where she was going to get all this, intensive care, and that she was going to be okay. And I mean, obviously she didn't leave the ICU, and it was only a day or so, but just I learned through these cancer patients, and I learned that, a lot of times it's the little things that make such a big difference. And this was such a big lesson for me, um, dealing with, the oncology patients. And at that point in time, as a new RN, I was not, there's no way that I would have been ready for hospice nursing. But later on in my career, I really embraced being a hospice nurse, and I really embraced trying to bring comfort, and pain relief and guidance to a patient and a family that are in the most vulnerable time of their life, and just try and hold everybody together and hang on, and to celebrate and make memories, and all the things that I could not have been, I was not emotionally prepared to do those things as a new grad. And so, through my years of nursing, and hospice came at the end of my nursing career. It didn't come in the beginning, in the middle. It came towards the end. And I think that I was much more equipped. And so kudos to all those nurses. I had a nurse who mentored me in hospice, and she'd been a hospice nurse for 30 years. And I don't know how she did that. I mean, when I was doing hospice, and I'm not going to get into a lot of that, because we will do an episode on my experience as hospice. And there's some kind of funny things that, the lighter things that I will share on my journey with some of our hospice patients. But um, it's just, it is such a special way to nurse and for these families. So my last thing I'm going to say about hospice, because I know we're going to do an episode on that, is just give hospice a chance. Don't feel that hospice is something that you get when, you have people say, "Oh, when you have one foot in the grave." Don't look at it like that, because there's so many services, there's so much help that they could give you. And just because you go on hospice, that doesn't mean you're going to die tomorrow, but it gives you all kinds of equipment that's paid for, and medicines that are paid for. And you get a nurse, social worker, chaplain, music therapy. You get all of these wonderful things that help you be able to travel down that journey, knowing that you have some terminal condition, but to be able to travel that journey on your own terms and with some grace, and having all the tools that you need to have that be a quality of life over, quantity. And I'm not going to get in. I told you back in episode 1 that we could get down some rabbit trails, but the thing I wanted to emphasize today on today's episode was, being a new nurse, you are so focused on getting your tasks done, getting your medications done, getting your wound care done, getting your IVs done, your IV antibiotics, getting all those tasks done, that sometimes you miss the most important thing of all, and that's the human touch. And that was something that woman needed from me that day that I couldn't provide. And it was a very, very hard lesson to learn. I never made a mistake like that again, but it was a mistake on her behalf. I'm learning as a new grad. And I don't know and hindsight's 2020. And if I was the nursing supervisor, charge nurse making up those assignments, I don't know that I would have given a new grad someone that might have been that close. But then again, there's no crystal ball. You don't know. It's always easy to go back, but I'm glad I had that experience early on so that I could and I could learn from that situation. I just wish it wouldn't have been at her expense, and I would have been able to stay there and comfort her and hold her hand and that. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to wrap up this episode 4 as some of my really hard lessons as a new grad, and then we're going to travel through some other phases of my nursing career. We're going to get probably the next phase will be moving on to my emergency nursing. And there's a lot of things that went on there. Actually, one of the things that we'll talk about in a future episode is I felt very, very strong. And as nursing went on, I really developed this advocacy for patients. And I think that very first lesson that I shared with you today was the beginning of that, the beginning of wanting to fight for my patients and learning what is the best way to do that. And I did, while I was working in the emergency room, I did get an emergency room doctor fired. Had a lot of backlash, but we'll talk about that. That'll probably be the next episode. So if you're into kind of juicy stories, that one's going to be probably the juiciest one I have in this series of my nursing career, but I think it's a very, very important one too. And so we will see you back on Bedside Stories. It's a journey of an RN to becoming a patient advocate, and we will see you back for episode 5. Take care.